The night my mother-in-law slid the divorce papers across the marble table, no one in the Russo house looked surprised. Elena did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She only adjusted her napkin, looked at me once, and said I had taken enough from this family. Marco sat beside her with one hand on his wineglass. He did not touch the papers. He did not look at me either. His sister kept eating. One of the restaurant managers stood near the doorway like this was just another business dinner. Everyone heard her tell me to sign, leave, and stop pretending I belonged in a kitchen built by real talent. I signed. Not because she was right. Because I was done explaining myself to people who only respected noise. When I stood up, Elena gave me one last smile. Cold. Certain. Finished. You never belonged here, Iris. That should have been the end of it. It was not. 1 year later, after my name appeared in every serious food column in New York, Elena Russo called me herself and invited me back to dinner. I said yes before she finished the sentence and brought a lawyer. I did not say yes because I missed that house. I said yes because Elena Russo did not call to apologize. Women like her never reach backward unless something in front of them is falling apart. Her voice was soft on the phone. Almost sweet. She asked about my health first. That alone told me the situation was worse than I thought. Then she said the family had been following the press around my restaurant. She said she was proud. She said time had a way of correcting misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. That was the word she chose for humiliation. For silence. For the night she pushed me out and let her son watch. I looked at the reservation board in my office while she spoke. Every seat was booked for 3 weeks. My investors were asking about a second location. My life no longer needed anything from the Russos. Which is exactly why the invitation mattered. People like Elena only reopen doors when they want to move a cost through them. Before I tell you what was waiting at that dinner table, tell me where you are watching from. Because that was the moment this stopped feeling personal and started looking planned. My name is Iris Bennett. I am 32 years old. I live in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, New York. I work as a chef and founder of a small tasting restaurant. And right now, I am telling you this because some families only respect your value after they lose the right to define it. When I married Marco Russo, I did not marry into warmth. I married into a system. The Russos called it legacy. What it really meant was hierarchy. Elena Russo at the top. Her son in the center. Everyone else arranged by usefulness. I never fit the shape they trusted. The Russo family built its reputation on old-school Italian dining. Loud kitchens. Heavy sauces. White tablecloths. Stories about sacrifice repeated so often they sounded like scripture. Elena treated every meal like a stage and every seat at her table like a ranking. If you were loud, fast, and familiar, you belonged. If you hesitated, asked questions, or moved differently, she marked you. Marco was her chosen heir. Smooth voice. Expensive watch. Clean jacket. He knew how to repeat the family story in a way that made investors nod and staff stay quiet. But behind the performance, he relied on other people to hold up everything he touched. Then there was me. I was the outsider wife. The woman who did not come from restaurant blood. The woman who noticed too much. The woman Elena described as delicate whenever she wanted to make me sound weak. I was not weak. I was careful. Precise. Harder to fool than they understood. That difference irritated Elena from the start. She liked people she could overwhelm with speed, guilt, and family language. I kept asking what things meant. What papers said. What promises actually covered. In a house like hers, that alone made me dangerous long before I knew it myself. I was supposed to smile, adapt, and be grateful for scraps of approval. Instead, I listened. I remembered. I noticed who was speaking and who was always expected to pay for it later. In that family, I was valuable only when I was silent. The second I started reading what things meant, I became a problem. The problem was never that I could not cook. The problem was that I could not survive the kind of kitchen the Russos worshipped. I have sensory processing issues. I learned that language long before I met Marco. Certain sounds hit too hard. Certain smells do not stay in the air for me. They stack. Burnt butter. Old seafood. Garlic left too long in hot oil. Wine reduction catching at the edges of a pan. In a quiet room, I could separate them. In a crowded kitchen, they crashed into each other until my whole body locked up. Elena did not call it a condition. She called it weakness. The first time she saw me step back from the line during a Sunday service at the flagship in White Plains, she looked at the staff like I had embarrassed her on purpose. After that, she made a joke of it. If the music was loud, she turned it louder. If the sauté station got smoky, she sent me closer. If I went pale, she smiled and told people I had delicate nerves and no place in real hospitality. Marco was worse because he hid behind manners. He never mocked me in public the way Elena did. He simply translated me downward. He told people I was anxious, sensitive, better with ideas than pressure. He made me sound decorative, temporary, like a person you seat near the window and never trust with the business. Soon Elena banned me from the kitchen during family events. Not fully, just enough to make the point. I could set the table, greet guests, fold napkins, stay out of the way. She said it with that polished voice rich people use when they want control to sound like kindness. But then the strange part started. Whenever a dish was wrong and nobody could explain why, they came to me. Not in front of the staff. Never that. Late at night, after service, Elena would bring a spoon into her office. A little white porcelain tasting spoon from the private cabinet she only used for investors and critics. She would hold it out without looking at me and say, "Tell me what is missing." I always knew. Too much acid at the back. Salt landing early but not carrying through. Heat where fragrance should be. Fat with no lift. I could hear flavor the way other people heard bad music. They hated that part. The part where the girl they treated like a flaw could find what they're golden. Air could not. They never thanked me. Elena just took the spoon back, adjusted her cuff, and acted like the answer had belonged to the family, not me. Getting thrown out of the Russo house should have broken me. That was clearly the plan. Elena wanted me ashamed. Marco wanted me quiet. They both expected me to disappear into somebody else's spare room and spend the next year explaining why my marriage failed. I did not. I rented time in a test kitchen in Red Hook. It was small, clean, and almost silent between bookings. No shouting from the line. No pans slamming into burners. No perfume from the dining room drifting into the food. For the first time in years, I could think while I cooked. That changed everything. I started building dishes the only way I trusted. One layer at a time. One correction at a time. Nothing decorative before the structure held. Texture first. Then temperature. Then acid. Then aroma. Then the last 5 seconds on the tongue after the bite was gone. I stopped trying to cook like the Russos because I finally understood that their chaos was not talent. It was theater. Expensive, masculine, inherited theater. I did not need to beat them at their game. I needed to build mine somewhere they could not define it. So I built a plant-based tasting menu. Not because it was fashionable. Because vegetables told the truth faster. No animal stock. No heavy sauce masking weak structure. Just precision, heat, acid, texture, and finish. I worked mornings alone and nights with one prep cook who talked only when necessary. I kept a legal pad beside every station. Sweetness after heat. Bitter too early. Acid delayed by 4 seconds. Most people would have laughed at notes like that. But the dishes kept getting better. Then one Thursday, a local food writer came in through a friend of a friend. No publicist. No investor. No camera crew. Just one woman, a notebook, and a reservation under another name. She ordered the full tasting menu. At the end, she stood near the pass and asked who built the menu. I told her I did. She looked at me for a second and said, "This is the first quiet plate I have had in New York that still feels powerful." 3 days later, my name appeared in print. The article was short, but it named the room, the restraint, and the discipline behind it. It called the food unusually exact. And for the first time, I wanted them to see what they lost. Not on the front page. Not yet. But it was enough for the Russos to notice. The article ran on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Elena Russo called. Not texted. Not emailed. Called. That alone told me the review had landed where I wanted it to. People like Elena only use their voice when they think it still carries authority. I let it ring twice before answering. Her tone was polished, measured, warm in the way expensive people sound when they are trying to make control feel like grace. She said my name first, slowly, as if she had not once spat across a marble table. Then she said she had read the piece. She said the family was pleased to see I had kept busy. She said talent deserved recognition, even when it appeared in unexpected places. I looked out the office window and said nothing. Elena filled the silence herself. She said the Russos had always supported excellence. She said the family name was large enough to make room for misunderstandings. She said time had a way of softening things that felt harsh. Finally, I spoke. I said, "You did not call to discuss time." She went quiet for one beat. Then she laughed. Soft. Dry. The laugh she used when a server dropped a fork and she wanted the room to feel it. She said, "You always were more direct than was good for you." I said, "And you always waited too long to say what you wanted." That landed. I could hear it in the way she took her next breath. She shifted to business without admitting she had shifted. She asked how many seats the restaurant had. She asked whether I planned to expand. She asked if I had backing or just press. She asked those questions like they were casual. They were not casual. They were inventory. I answered enough to let her know I understood the game. 16 seats. Full bookings. Strong partners. No need for help. She said help was not what she had in mind. I said, "Then say what you have in mind." This time she did not circle it. She said the family should have dinner. Just family. No history. No tension. A chance to start fresh. I almost smiled. No history. From Elena Russo, that meant paperwork was waiting nearby. I asked who would be there. She said Marco. His sister. Herself. Maybe one or two people from the business, if the conversation required it. There it was. Not dinner. Structure. I told her I would come. She sounded relieved too fast, which meant the need was real. Before she could dress it up again, I ended the call. Then I called my attorney and said, "Clear Thursday night. I think my former family is about to ask me for something they cannot afford to say plainly." By Thursday afternoon, they pulled back. Elena's assistant called with a polished voice and a family excuse. Scheduling problem. Business emergency. So sorry. Dana looked at me once and said, "They are waiting for you to become more expensive." She was right. A good review was useful. A national moment was better. A good review got her attention. Michelin would force her hand. So I went back to work. The room in Red Hook kept filling. Then the investors started calling. Real hospitality money. Patient money. One of them had a quiet habit of buying distressed hospitality paper when operators mistook family mythology for solvency. He was also the kind of investor who asked about margins, sourcing, leases, labor, and brand durability before he ever asked about wallpaper. I chose carefully. That was another thing the Russos never understood about me. I was not slow. I was selective. There is a difference. By late summer, Stillleaf had a waiting list, a disciplined back office, and enough attention to attract people who usually ignored first-time founders. I kept the dining room small. 16 seats. 2 turns on Friday and Saturday. 1 on the other nights. Clean lighting. Quiet enough that the food could speak before the room did. Then Michelin came. Not as a rumor. Not as a hopeful whisper from bloggers. Real inspectors. Real silence. Real follow-up. A quiet 16-seat plant-based room in Red Hook was suddenly impossible to ignore. When the guide awarded us 1 star, the calls doubled. Investors moved faster. Writers started using words like singular and exacting. That was the point where Elena called again. This time she did not pretend it was casual. She said the family wanted to celebrate my success properly. She said certain things looked different after achievement. She said it was time to put resentment away and talk like adults. Then she added one line too smoothly. There may also be a business conversation that benefits everyone. There it was. Not apology. Not love. Utility. I asked for the date. She gave me Saturday. I said I would be there. Then I called Dana again. The Russo house still looked the same. Stone facade. Iron lanterns. 2 black SUVs in the circular drive. The place still performed wealth the way Elena performed certainty. Dana arrived in her own car 3 minutes after I did. Navy suit. Eyes that missed nothing. Elena had not invited her, but that was no longer Elena's decision. The house manager opened the door and hesitated when he saw Dana beside me. I said, "She is with me." He stepped aside. The dining room had been staged for 6. Elena at the head. Marco on her right. His sister Vivian across from him. At the far end sat Greg Fuller, the longtime operations director for Russo Dining Group, and a man I recognized from a bank event 2 years earlier. Thomas Keene. Commercial lending. So Elena had lied even in the invitation. Not family. Structure. Elena rose halfway from her chair, kissed the air near my cheek, then looked at Dana like she was a stain on linen. I thought this was family. I took my seat. It is. That is why I brought counsel. Marco gave a short laugh as if I had made an awkward joke. Greg stared at his water glass. Keene did not speak at all. Dinner opened with small talk. Elena praised the Michelin notice. Vivian asked if the ceremony was emotional. Marco asked whether I planned to expand to the West Coast. I answered politely and gave them nothing they could spend later. Then the first real move came. Elena lifted her wine and said she was glad to see excellence back in the family orbit. Orbit. As if I had drifted away from a son that still belonged to her. She talked about legacy. About standards over generations. About how the market had become confused by trends and noise. She said people were hungry for authenticity again, and that the Russo name still meant something deep in Westchester, Greenwich, and the city. Translation. The old machine was slipping and wanted my shine on its hood. I let her speak. Let the room listen to her arrange history so that I sounded like an offshoot of their greatness instead of a woman they had forced out. Then I asked the useful question. What exactly do you want from me? No one moved for a second. Elena set down her glass. A collaboration. Marco leaned in as if he had been waiting for the cleaner word. Some guest dinners. Maybe a seasonal menu residency. Media together. A statement that shows there is no bad blood. It helps everyone. Everyone, I repeated. Yes. Greg finally cleared his throat. The group could benefit from a recalibration. Your name changes the narrative fast. Narrative. Not food. Not operations. Narrative. Dana opened her folder and spoke for the first time. Do you have terms in writing? Marco smiled too quickly. It is not that formal. Dana looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a scan. Then there is no deal. Elena slid a cream folder across the table. So there were terms after all. Not thick. Not long. Just dressed to look harmless. Dana read while the rest of us waited. I watched Elena instead. The small muscles around her mouth tightened each time Dana turned a page. Marco kept tapping one finger against his napkin ring. Greg stayed still. Keene kept his hands folded. Dana reached page 4 and stopped. Then page 5. Then the addendum. She looked up. This is not a collaboration agreement. Elena gave a thin smile. It is a draft. Dana ignored her. This shifts reputational and promotional liability toward my client if the rollout fails. It also ties her brand to a debt-affected operating structure through a performance trigger. The word debt changed the air. Marco leaned back fast. That is a dramatic reading. Dana turned the page toward him. If it is dramatic, read section 8 aloud. He did not touch the paper. Elena cut in. We are discussing family support, not litigating language. I looked at her. If it is support, why hide the language? She answered with control. No one is hiding anything. We are trying to repair trust with sophistication. Not every conversation needs to be treated like an attack. Then Marco made his mistake. He said, we are asking for help because the group is under pressure, Iris. Temporary pressure. That is all. 1 rough quarter. Maybe 2. If you come in now, we stabilize the story before people start asking the wrong questions. 3 years earlier, Elena had insisted the townhouse be held through Marco alone. Cleaner for taxes, she said. Cleaner for succession. At the time, I heard planning. What she really meant was control. So when Marco needed collateral, he did not need my signature. He only needed the same arrogance that had ruled that table. Wrong questions. I kept my face still. What pressure? He waved one hand. Foot traffic. Costs. A landlord issue at one location. Short-term financing. A few private markers Marco thought he could outrun. Nothing he could explain once the numbers stopped lying. Dana looked at Keene. Mr. Keene, are you here as counsel for the lender? Keene gave the kind of answer men give when they have been told to attend, but not to speak. I am here as an observer. Which meant yes. Greg tried to rescue the room. The point is simple. With your recent profile, we can reposition the brand, smooth the market, and create space. I turned to him. Space for what? He did not answer. Marco did. To breathe. The second he said it, Elena looked at him. Too late. People only talk about breathing room when the ceiling is already lower than they admit. I folded my hands in my lap and asked the question as gently as I could. What did you pledge, Marco? Marco did not answer right away. He looked at Elena first. That told me everything. Men who still think they are in charge do not check their mother first. Elena set down her fork with perfect control. This is not an interrogation. Dana closed the cream folder. Then do not present a legal document across a dinner table and call it reconciliation. Greg shifted in his chair. Keene kept looking at the table. Vivian had gone completely still. For the first time all night, nobody was performing. Family. Marco tried one more clean version. I moved assets temporarily. The group needed liquidity. We had payroll pressure, vendor pressure, and one lease problem that could have triggered wider panic. I asked again. What did you pledge? His jaw tightened. The Mamaroneck location. My equity. Some receivables. Dana said, and Marco looked away. Elena answered for him. A temporary collateral package was put in place to protect the family. Protect. Rich families love that word when what they mean is transfer. I kept my voice level. What else? No one spoke. So I opened my bag and placed a navy folder in the center of the table. I had not seen Elena Russo lose color before. Her eyes dropped to the tabbed edge. First Hudson commercial. She recognized it before anyone else did. Marco frowned. What is that? Dana answered. The current loan file. The room changed. Keene finally looked up. Greg stopped pretending this was manageable. Elena did not touch the folder. The moment she touched it, she would admit she knew what was inside. I opened it myself. The first document was the amended bridge loan agreement. Russo Dining Group had borrowed against operating pressure, but Marco had signed a personal guarantee package to keep the lender from freezing the line early. The second document was the collateral schedule. Mamaroneck. His membership interest. Flagship cash flow sweep rights. Then the Terrytown townhouse. Held through Marco alone. Refinanceable without one honest conversation in my direction. The house he called our future had always been a family-controlled asset wearing the costume of a marriage. Vivian whispered, Marco. He snapped back. I was fixing it. Dana turned one page. You were not fixing it. You were layering default risk. On top of vendor pressure and lease stress, he had buried private gambling markers inside the same lie he kept calling liquidity. Keene said, she is correct. Marco looked at him like betrayal had just entered the room. I slid the next page forward. Assignment of loan. Effective 6 weeks earlier. From First Hudson Commercial Bank to Quiet Harbor Holdings. Marco stared at the name. Who is Quiet Harbor? I met his eyes. I am. Silence. Landed hard. Stillleaf had not only brought me press. It had brought disciplined capital. During the second raise, one investor built a side vehicle to acquire distressed hospitality paper when it made strategic sense. When the Russo package surfaced, I did not chase revenge. I bought leverage. Elena finally spoke. You bought our debt. No. I looked at her. I bought the obligation your son signed when he decided my life was collateral. That hit Marco harder than the paperwork. He pushed back from the table. You cannot do this over dinner. Dana placed 2 more papers beside the folder. We are not doing it over dinner. We are notifying you that the lender changed 6 weeks ago and that your proposal tonight tried to shift reputational exposure onto my client before required disclosures widened. Greg shut his eyes. He knew that was true. Elena tried to stand. Tried to recover the room through posture alone. This is a private family matter. Dana did not move. You invited a banker and your operations director. You made it commercial the moment you asked her to carry your risk. Then I placed the final document on the table. The divorce petition. Marco looked from the petition to me like he had not understood until then that the night was over in more than one way. I never raised my voice. You did not lose me tonight, Marco. You lost me when you signed a future you could not afford and used my home to hold it up. Then I turned to Elena. This is not your version. This is what you just read. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. So I gave her the cleanest truth in the room. You did not lose control tonight. You signed it away months ago. Then I stood up. Dana gathered the file. Keen stayed seated. Greg looked sick. Vivian stared at her brother like she was seeing the family business without the family story wrapped around it. I did not wait for anyone to stop me. When I walked out of the Russo house that night, no one followed. I did not foreclose the next morning. That is the kind of detail people invent when they want revenge to feel cinematic. Real consequences move slower. They arrive by email, by notice period, by missed cure deadlines, by meetings where the tone gets more polite as the options get worse. Quiet Harbor sent the required notices. Dana handled the divorce filing. The lender side demanded full disclosure, updated reporting, and a restructuring proposal that did not depend on my name, my press, or my restaurant carrying their collapse in public. They could not produce one. Russo Dining Group had spent too many years surviving on story, legacy, reputation. Elena knew how to fill a dining room with memory. She did not know how to save a business hollowed out by vanity, bad decisions, and a son who thought confidence was a substitute for math. The first thing to go was the Mamaroneck location. No speech. No scandal. Just dark windows on a Tuesday and a printed notice taped inside the glass. A month later, the White Plains flagship lost control of its cash flow. Vendors tightened terms. Private dining bookings thinned out. Then the Scarsdale house quietly hit the market. Elena did not call me again. She sent one email. 3 lines. No apology. No admission. Just one complaint that I had been colder than family should allow. Even then, she was still trying to grade my tone while auctioning off her own certainty. I drove past it once on my way back from a meeting in Westchester. The lanterns still glowed. But the front lawn had a real estate sign planted near the hedge like a final insult from reality. That house had always felt less like a home than a throne room. Seeing it listed did not make me happy. It made me feel correct. Marco called twice. I did not answer. Then he sent a message asking if we could speak privately, without lawyers, as if privacy had not been the weapon that made all of this possible. Dana replied for me. After that, he stopped. Months later, I saw him once. Not in court. Not at the house. In a kitchen. I was meeting a supplier in Bergen County when I stopped for coffee near a restaurant loading dock. Marco came out the back door in a black prep coat carrying 2 tubs of peeled shallots. No watch. No polished shoes. No investor voice. Just a man checking a delivery sheet with cold hands and tired eyes. He saw me. For 1 second, I thought he might walk over. He did not. He looked at the tubs, then at me, and gave the smallest nod I had ever seen from him. Not apology. Not pride. Just recognition. Then he went back inside. That was enough. The man who once called recklessness confidence now spent his nights portioning shallots under somebody else's numbers. I did not need him ruined. I needed him real. Stillleaf kept growing, but I grew it carefully. No empire talk. No inflated rollout. We added a second room in Brooklyn the following spring, kept the menu precise, and built a training program that favored discipline over noise. The investors who stayed with me understood the rule from the beginning. Nothing expands faster than the structure can hold. That rule saved more than the business. On Sunday mornings, when the dining room is closed, we run a small cooking workshop for kids with sensory processing differences. No blaring music. No shouting. No fluorescent panic. Just clean stations, measured heat, and ingredients arranged in a way that lets their bodies trust the room before asking their minds to create inside it. I started that program because nobody did that for me. When I was younger, people kept trying to turn my limits into my identity. Too sensitive. Too difficult. Too much. They were wrong. I was not broken. I was reading an environment that did not know how to deserve me. Leaving that family was not failure. It was triage. Some people will only call you difficult when they can no longer use you quietly. Some families will only praise your strength after they lose the right to spend it. And some doors do not open again because love came back. They open because the bill did. If someone keeps asking you to trust their version, stop listening. Ask to read it.